Hi, everyone. Welcome to Forget Me Not Radio, the podcast where we discuss taboo topics and other issues society would rather silence. My name is Amy Dommett, and I'm your host. Today, we are speaking with Somy Ali. Somy is a survivor, a Bollywood actress, film producer, and founder of No More Tears, a nonprofit that works to free victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. Her personal story will captivate you, and her work with victims will inspire you. Somy's interview spans the years and is a phenomenal story of how a victim was transformed into a voice for those who need it most. If you would like more information about Forget Me Not Radio, you can visit amydommett.com/podcast. There you can learn about upcoming episodes and guests, as well as support this project through patreon.com or PayPal. It is through supporters like you that we are able to bring this podcast series to you. Subscribe to us on iTunes and stay up to date with all the new episodes. And if you're already a subscriber, we would love to have you rate and review us. Your feedback is important. Somy Ali from No More Tears, and she is here to talk to us about what her organization does as well as what brought her to this place. So let's go with that.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is so fun and interesting. As you said, I'm the founder of No More Tears and the president. I started it in 2007 with a mission to assist and empower victims of domestic violence and human trafficking.
Perfect. So tell me a little bit about, I guess, the why behind, why did you start No More Tears? I'm sure there's a story behind that brought you to this place that you are right now with this nonprofit.
So I'm originally from Pakistan. I was born there, and I was there till the age of 12. And there was, I always say this, the environment in the house was not healthy. It was a very dysfunctional environment. There was domestic violence in my home. I was, as a child, physically and sexually abused when I was 5 years old. That the first incident took place. There were about 3 incidents. Then again when I was 9 in Pakistan. And my brother was physically and sexually abused as well. So, having that foundation as a child and having gone through things that you shouldn't be exposed to or experience as a child, I think it really set the foundation to do something as an adult. And then at 12 we moved to Florida. My mom's brother lived in North Miami, and my half sister actually brought me here with my younger brother, and we started school here. And at the age of 13 there was a guy who was 17 who kind of hung out with our crowd, although he was older. And at the age of 13 I was a victim of rape. So after going through what happened in Pakistan, then going through the rape incident in United States, in Florida, then at 16 I ended up moving to India I had a crush on an actor. I used to watch Bollywood films like an addict. That's the only source of entertainment we had in the 80s in Pakistan. It was cricket, Bollywood movies, or yummy Pakistani food. So we grew up on Bollywood films. So when I was living here in Florida, I used to watch Indian movies, Hindi films all the time. Watched a Hindi film, there was a new actor, had a dream that night that I have to go to India and look for him and find him and marry him, which sounds idiotic at this age.
How old were you again?
15 when I saw the movie. And so I wake up rummaging through the house for a suitcase. And I told my mom, I said, Mom, I had this dream. I have to go marry this guy. And she's like, what? She's like, go to your room and don't come out until I tell you to. And I was like, but don't you understand? It's like, it's my destiny. Like, I was told, like, I have to go. Things weren't going well for me in Florida. I hated school. I was skipping school. I was hanging out with the wrong crowd. I think when you grow up in a dysfunctional home, your friends tend to be people that are from dysfunctional homes as a teenager, because you get accepted by them. And you speak the same language. So I think that's what happened. But the basic, I can give you an example, is that it started with Bon Jovi, the friend circle, and when it ended up in Megadeth, the drugs got equally hard as the music. Yeah. So with Bon Jovi, it was just cigarettes. But then when it got to Megadeth, it was like LSD. And, I never really enjoyed drugs. I think the only thing I probably tried was pot. I tried beer with one of the guys. I hated it. I hated the way it tasted. I just didn't want to indulge in that. So I was sitting around, not going to school, completely dropped out at 15, watching Indian movies all day long. And I told my mom, and she said, no, you're not going to India. Like, you don't know this guy. He's an actor. Are you insane? And I was like, you just don't want me to go because you're being selfish and you don't want me to do something that I'm supposed to do. And so I called my dad in Pakistan and I told him, I said, Daddy, I hate the culture here. My dad's very religious. So I totally conned him. I said, you can't hear the call to prayer. It's very westernized and I miss Pakistan, and we have family before partition. Some people remained in India in 1947 when India and Pakistan, parted. So I said, I want to meet the family members. I want to get our, that's our roots. Like, I feel so isolated here. I'm not even going to school. And I was like, please, Mom won't let me go. And I want to meet the family. I want to see Taj Mahal, blah, blah, blah. So Dad sent a ticket for me to go to Pakistan. Go to Pakistan, 2-3 days later, end up in Bombay. And staying in a 5-star hotel, sitting in a lobby with my dad, and some guy approached me and he said, hey, we're looking for a new girl for a movie. Would you be interested in acting in it? So I was like, wait a minute. Okay, so if I need to find this actor whose photo I carried with me in my wallet, as if we weren't able to know who he is, because he was like the Brad Pitt of India. I was like, if I have to find him and get married to him, I have to join films. It's a no-brainer. Ended up doing 10 films, I started a relationship with him, was with him for 8 years. And the fairy tale ended very badly. It was just not the character in the movie that I saw. It was not at all him. But on a brighter note, I got to travel all over India rather. The funny part is, to date, I spent 8 years there. I never saw the Taj Mahal. So, wow. and that was the con I got my dad.
Part of your getting there,
yeah,
never even played out.
Exactly. So that's on my list to go back and at least accomplish that. Come back. So I break up. It's 2000. I'm 25 years old. Come back here, throw a pity party for myself for a year. Nobody attends, of course. My brother's like, look, Somy, you dropped out at 15. Why don't you start school? And at that time, I read a book called A Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. And I fell in love with psychology. Absolutely fell in love with. I was always very nosy. I loved human behavior. I wanted to figure out why people are insane. Of course, has a lot to do with the upbringing and also my own insanity of going to a country where I don't know anyone and trying to marry an actor.
Yeah, some people call that insane. Some people call that adventure.
I'd like to say it was very precocious of me. Anyway, so I read this book and I was blown away and I loved the book and I was like, you know what? I want to major in psychology. So, of course, had to do the GED stuff, go to Nova, got enrolled and started doing a bachelor's degree in psychology, which I finished in 2 years. But the very pivotal aspect of going to Nova was, this is a girl, or a young lady at the time, I was 25, almost 26, who had no foundation of education. I never really was in school or a good student. In Pakistan, I used to get in trouble all the time because there was so much dysfunctionality at the house. It was hard to study, and there was so much abuse in the home.
Let's talk about that, because even though what you're doing now is working with domestic violence victims and human trafficking victims. It's important to talk about child abuse and sexual assault and rape, because all of these pieces really fit together at the end of the day and how they affect individuals. And I just think it's such an important topic. You're saying that it affected your school and it affected where you went with your life, per se.
Well, I mean, I'm going to be a little graphic here because it's very important. It took me a long time to talk about being abused at 5. It took me years. I literally gave an interview about 2 years ago, and I was very afraid to talk about it because, every country has a culture. Our culture is very, very different to the American culture. Women and children are treated very differently in certain aspects of society in Pakistan than they are in the U.S.
Right.
So we had a guy who was a cook from Bangladesh in the house, and he basically I was in an office. So let me give you some background. So we grew up in a 26-bedroom house. It was a mansion, basically. My dad was a film producer, director of photography. He used to make films and advertising. So first floor was his studio. We lived on the second floor. And, we basically grew up, my brother and I grew up on servants. Mom was never around. She was a socialite. She had lots of friends. Her relationship was not good with my father, so she was out seeking something else to get to a place where she has peace. Unfortunately, she was never able to find that. And I was 5 years old running around the house trying to play with the servants because that's all there was there. Those were my adult friends. And they basically were giving me company. So I was in one of the employees' office, and I decided to color on his white wall while he was away. So I stood up on a chair and I started coloring on the white wall. And in walks the cook, who's from Bangladesh. His name was Abdul. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I'm coloring on Uncle So-and-so's wall to give him a surprise." And he said, "Have you ever seen baby chickens, like baby chicks or whatever?"
Yeah.
So I said, "No, I don't understand." So this is very vivid for me. Strangely enough, people tend to block it out. For me, it's very vivid to even a smell point.
Wow.
I can to date smell how he smelled. I can smell it in my mind. And he said, "I'll tell you what they feel like." And we used to wear frocks in Pakistan as children. And he pulled out my frock and he started touching my underwear. And he just started I don't know how to use the word for it, but he just started with both his hands touching me. And I said, "What are you doing?"
Touching it up.
Yeah. And he said, "Well, that's how soft they feel." And I said, "I have to go." And I jumped off the chair and ran. And then that was the first incident. And then there were 2 other incidents where he told me the third incident was in his servant quarters, because all our house help had servant quarters behind the house. And he said that he asked me if I had seen a penis before. He told me to come because he was going to show me baby chicks to a servant quarter. And I went there and he pulled down his pants and, he told me to stroke his penis. And I said, "It stinks." I remember that. I said, "It smells so bad. And where are the baby chicks?" And he said, "Well, if you tell your mom and dad, they will get hurt and I will hurt you very badly." So I ran out of the servant quarters. For about a week, I lived with it and I was terrified. And then I finally told my mother. My mom, so we had intercom system in the house. My mom called my dad on the first floor from our bedroom. And my dad told me to come down immediately. And then he called Abdul in. 4 men, including my dad, beat the crap out of Abdul in front of me.
Wow.
To a level where he had his teeth knocked out. And my dad told him to touch my feet and apologize and assume that I'm his daughter and he's sorry for what he had done. And I was 5, so I saw blood everywhere and I was already seeing violence in the house upstairs on the second floor. So I see these 4 or 5 guys, including dad, pounding on this man. They picked him up. He was unconscious on dad's office floor. Picked him up. I don't know what happened to him. Who knows? I think they just got rid of him and threw him out on the street. There was no police report filed. There was no case. There was nothing. The one thing I remember was I was told never to tell anyone that this happened to me.
And that was coming from your parents.
Yeah, my mom and dad said, look, and I'm 5, and they're telling me no man is going to want to marry you because someone else has touched you. And you should never repeat this to anyone. So I remember that distinctly. And for some reason, I thought I did something wrong. I kept thinking like, okay, what did I do wrong? I did something wrong. So the appalling part of all of this is that it could have been really, really bad, the sexual abuse. It was pretty bad because I still remember it very clearly. But the sad part is that culturally you're told not to tell anyone, and you're re-victimizing a 5-year-old child, which, I mean, those years are pivotal to our adulthood. They basically contributed to creating damaged goods, my parents.
Well, it brings in that shame aspect that we see culturally too.
Right.
You know, there is that, but we were talking about it before, but the victim blaming, or the being ashamed of what has happened to you, and you know, in your story, as I'm sure in so many others, this is an example of you're 5 years old and you're being told that what happened to you is shameful.
Right. Exactly.
You know?
And I would
even if those words weren't used, it's still what you were being told.
Yeah, because you feel the energy. You know, you can tell by the tone and the body language of your mom and dad, who are the most important people to your being, irrespective of them being abusive to you or not. That's all you know as a child. And then I would always watch see mom's friends come over. They were all very wealthy. They were socialites, and they had bruises and they had black eyes. And I would ask my mom, so anyone older we refer as auntie.
Okay.
So auntie so and so, why is she hurt? What happened to her? And it was always, oh, auntie so and so fell down the stairs. And I was like, that is a universal euphemism for domestic violence.
Yes.
The fell down the stairs. You could live in a house where there's not one step, but that's the euphemism.
You still fell down the stairs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
and I realized that, of course, after starting No More Tears, that they use it here as well in the U.S. But so there was a lot of domestic violence in sight, very, very close proximity, happening to my mother, happening to her friends, and you don't talk about it. You just kind of sweep it under the rug.
As somebody who grew up here in the States, I actually find that really interesting, because I think, and you know, and it could be the circles that you run in or the people that you're with, but here, people, I think, cover it more often. It's not that it happens and we ignore it or we excuse it, but victims very often hide it and cover it.
Right.
You know, they cover it up with makeup. They don't go out in public. If it's bad enough that they can't,
right,
then they come up with that excuse to cover it. But it, you know, it's almost like if people knew this was happening to me, they would think differently or poorly of me. Or they would try to get me to leave, which we know victims...
Well, they would cover it there as well.
Okay.
They would wear sunglasses. When my mom's friends would come over, they would have sunglasses.
So there was that same
the minute
piece.
they got inside mom's bedroom, they would take off the sunglasses. My mom, when she was abused, she would wear... I remember her wearing sunglasses, and there were a lot of incidents. My mom was a rebel. She was not a typical Pakistani woman. She's actually originally from Iraq. She's Middle Eastern. And she just, you know, not that makes a difference. It's the same culture. It's the same Islamic culture. You know, she just was not going to put up with what was going on, and she was going to she fought against it. And, you know, men being stronger physically than women in some instances, she failed. So there were a lot of incidents, and my father was very influential. He knew everyone because he was a famous film producer. He had his own advertising agency. So everyone knew him. So he was, you know, people were afraid of him. So to a level where I remember one of mom's friends came. She was beaten very badly, and the husband called my father and said, "Kick her out. I don't want her your wife to help her." And dad came and told my mom to have this lady leave, and that lady had to leave because my mom didn't have a choice. But that's the culture that I grew up in, and not to say all of it is bad, because you can't put everything in one basket, but it was insane.
But then that's something, again, that we talk, not here, this being recorded, but, we talked about that. And when you're talking about abuse, when you're talking about assault or, physical, emotional, any kind of violence in the home, it's not all bad. And it would be the same as cultural. These bad things happen in sometimes an otherwise good relationship, but it doesn't make the impact any less.
But what really, really infuriates me is that it is not spoken about. It's not given enough light.
Definitely.
It's not given enough attention because there's a stigma attached to being a victim. There's a stigma attached to sexual abuse. Why are there no public service announcements or any about domestic violence or human trafficking or sexual abuse of children? Why? There's stuff on depression. There's stuff on Viagra, for God's sake.
Yes.
For constipation, if you're addicted to opiates or on pain pills. I mean, what about sexual abuse of little boys and little girls? Why is there no public service announcement for that? That really baffles me.
And I think, we share an opinion on this is because people don't want to talk about it.
Right.
And it's a sad reality. It's something that I think makes people uncomfortable. It has happened to them, to someone they love, or God forbid, they are, the perpetrator, they are the abuser, or their son or their daughter is the abuser.
Right.
And it becomes a very uncomfortable topic that it's just easier to place blame, walk away, turn the other way. What happens in your house stays in your house.
Ignore
mentality.
it.
Exactly.
Completely ignore it.
It'll go away, but it's not going away.
Yeah, and being raised Muslim and growing up in an Islamic country and that culture, that was my programming. That's where I come from, and I am a practicing Muslim. And what really upset me is when I started No More Tears, not knowing anything about how to run a nonprofit. My heart was just, I want to help people. I had some savings, about $380,000. Little something like that, and I was like, I used my money. I paid my Nova. I don't have any debts. I'm not into jewelry. I'm not a fancy person. I lived the glamorous life as a celebrity, and my ex-boyfriend was a bigger celebrity. He was huge, so I was swimming in diamonds, and it did nothing for me because I already came from wealth.
Right.
So it really didn't make me happy. There was no happiness there, and when I first started No More Tears, not knowing where I'm going, what I'm doing, I thought, let me go to places where I think there might be domestic violence and leave something there for women to call us. So I went to the mosque. That was my first stop. It was a mosque in Sunrise in Fort Lauderdale, in Broward County. And the imam was the Muslim cleric, was basically someone who I spoke with, and I said, hey, I have some brochures. I just started a nonprofit. My name is Somy Ali, and I'm Muslim, and I would like to leave some brochures in the women's section because they're segregated. And he said, there's no domestic violence in our culture, and you need to leave. He said blatantly, you need to leave. I need you to leave the mosque. And I said, well, you can't tell me to leave the mosque. And the irony is that guy was a convert from Wisconsin. He was American. He was as American could be. And I found it really ironic that he was telling me that there was no domestic violence in our culture.
I find a lot of what you're saying interesting because it ties, or I see the comparisons that go, even so, being a Christian, I've seen similar comments made, and I've heard from women in particular, and even men. I had a man that had literally reached out to me, and he made the comment that he brought up what his wife was doing to him at home in a Bible group, in a men's prayer group, and how he was kind of laughed at, and they chuckled and wrote him off. He said, I can't say what's happening to me because nobody believes me. And I've seen very similar things coming across where women have gone to counseling at their church, and they've been told to counsel with their husband or to be a better wife. And obviously not all mosques, not all churches are doing this, but
But a majority of them are.
Happen. Exactly.
And even in the mosque, if there is an issue, the women are more than often advised to work it out. And that is cultural. Look, you know, the holy book of Islam, the Quran, is it's hard to interpret it because it's very vague. You know, so I think there's a lot of misinterpretation of the Islamic religion of the actual book, and I think people have just kind of changed it to suit their own conveniences, and it's a very male-dominated culture, and it really bothers me because I feel like we're so behind to catch up with where women should be. Particularly in countries like Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, the Middle East in general. And what I realized with No More Tears is that, okay, so I grew up in this dysfunctional home. It was not healthy at all. And then I realized that these victims are being brought to the US and the same cultural practices are being followed here. There was a girl that was, this was not one of my cases, but there was run over by a car by her father in Michigan because she had a boyfriend or she fell in love with a guy, and it was deemed an honor killing. Obviously the father is in prison, but he has no remorse.
But culturally and in his family,
he thinks he did the absolute correct thing. So those, every culture has its good and bad.
Yes.
You know, even in America, even here, we have good and bad. Every human has good and bad. I feel like a lot of the bad in the culture from the Middle East and Pakistan is being implemented in relationships here because the men are programmed that this is how it should be, and they've seen their mothers go through it. So they, you know, it's the foundation. It's the very foundation that makes us the person that we are. Not very many people that are abused as children grow up to be healthy adults. That they don't.
Right.
I consider myself and my brother severely lucky that we were able to have the resilience to not be addicted to drugs or alcohol or like just be bums. We made something out of our lives, and we knew what was done to us was wrong, and we know that, you know, how to live a semi-normal life. The scars of being abused will never leave you. Why do I still remember the smell of that guy when I was 5? Why do I still remember the incident of abuse when I was 9 in Pakistan? Again, with the guards at the front gate. And you remember these things distinctly. Either you block them out or you remember them very clearly. But I'm very fortunate, and I consider myself and my brother to be very, very fortunate, because it could have been worse. It really could have been worse. We could have grown up in severe poverty. We wouldn't have a meal to eat. It could have been really, really bad. So I still try to see the silver lining in all of this, and No More Tears exists because of it. So that's the happier note, to look at it from an optimistic perspective.
And I think we have to look at the things that happen to us from that perspective, as difficult as it might be. When I started Forget Me Not Advocacy Group, that literally came from the feedback that I was getting from people in so many, just various situations, that honestly it blew my mind and it broke my heart simultaneously. Mm-hmm. Because for me, my blogging and my writing was about my personal healing, and maybe it was just my personality or it was just the teacher in me, but I felt the need to put that online and share that with the world. Mm-hmm. Because I guess my hope was, if I have to rehash all this garbage that's in my head and all these thoughts that are interfering with me being a productive member of society and me just being happy with me, mm-hmm. then I want it to potentially help someone.
Right.
But the feedback that I got from that was, my experience was intimate partner violence. So it was my marriage, it was my husband. But the feedback that I was getting when I was talking about my healing journey was coming from child abuse victims, sexual assault victims, rape victims, coming from intimate partner violence, coming from the gay community, as well as, it was from everywhere. And I personally, was uneducated and just, I knew my experience.
Right.
But what I didn't know was that now I say that these traumas that are inflicted either while you're in the care of someone who's supposed to love you or by those that are supposed to love you, those traumas that fall under that domestic violence umbrella, the repercussions and the quote, like the collateral damage that come from that are very similar.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And it's,
And any victim can relate. Even a victim of verbal abuse can relate to that.
Exactly.
Look, we all know about the power and control wheel. Yeah. That's what this is all about. And the most disgusting aspect of all of this is for a grown adult to hurt a child sexually and physically.
Agreed.
It's the most cowardice and the most pathetic act a human being can commit, and a crime. Yeah. It's horrible. And so
someone's so helpless.
Right.
They don't, and trusting.
Right. And there are days, so you live a very bipolar life when you go through these things. Even with No More Tears, it's a very, very bipolar kind of psyche that you develop, because you're seeing extreme bad all day long, and you're dealing with cases that are horrendous. Then you're seeing extremely good people as, for example, our board of directors, the lawyers that are representing these victims pro bono, the therapists that are charging us very, very little amount of money to help them heal. So you see these two complete polar opposite group of people, and it's like a very bipolar life of running a nonprofit. So it's just interesting how I see such bad, and then I deal with such good when it comes to the healing of the women and children and men. We also work with the LGBT community. There's a lot of domestic violence there as well.
Definitely, and it's another area that is probably talked about less.
Of course.
So we're actually going to speak to a therapist that works in that community in a future podcast, because I just think it's so important. It's important to shine the light on all of it, and I think that's what people don't realize is how much it is happening in the community, mm-hmm. and the spectrum of people that it affects, and how little it is discussed.
Well, they're human beings.
Exactly.
Just like a heterosexual person is. They're human beings. It's just that even in 2017, it really, really infuriates me and bothers me to a very significant degree that we have not been able to let people simply love.
Right.
Why? Even today. Why? It just infuriates me, and we're in the United States. Come on.
You're still dealing with humans, and humans like to cling to what they cling to, whatever that is, and sadly that often comes at the expense of others.
They have their discriminatory beliefs,
exactly.
and I have very, very close friends that are within the LGBT community, and I love them to be able to love who they want to love, and it's just really, it breaks my heart. It's like if someone was hurting a family member of mine. It's so horrifying that we cannot let people love who they want to love. It's sad.
No, it's such a, I just see, I actually spoke, it was very interesting, when I did my book release, mm-hmm. We were at a little small wine bar,
okay,
and it was up in Wilton Manors, or right next to Wilton Manors,
right,
and I had one of the most interesting conversations with a group of lesbian women who came in, and they were like, so have you talked about how it affects the gay community? Have you talked about what is going on there, with LGBT, and how it's affecting us and the dynamics? And I said, no, I haven't. Why? Because I need to have a better understanding of that.
Right.
And I think that when we are willing to open ourselves up to the experiences of others, mm-hmm. then we are much more willing to be able to relate and to understand and to support the experiences of others.
Right.
And, I just found that in my own personal life, that as I grew and matured and got away from, what maybe I held encapsulated as an ideal life, that I became much more open-minded and, if I agree with you or don't agree with you on whatever the topic might be, if we share the same belief, religious beliefs, or if we don't, it's all really irrelevant at the end of the day. Like you said, we are all human.
Right.
And
right.
humans deserve to be loved and cherished and cared for and treated
with respect.
Just with respect, exactly.
Right.
And
it's funny because not funny, but in growing up in Pakistan, so I was always told that homosexuals are going to hell, Jews are going to hell, and basically anyone that's not Muslim is going to hell. Also, I remember this very, very clearly. I was whistling. I had just learned how to whistle. I was probably 6, and I went to show. I'll teach you. So I'm whistling. I had just learned to whistle, and I went to show my dad, and I was like, Daddy, look, I can whistle. And he said, girls do not whistle. It's inappropriate.
Wow.
And I still remember that to date. And I think I basically just didn't, obviously I didn't understand I couldn't comprehend for the life of me what that meant.
Was there a reason behind that, or is it just
culturally,
okay,
good girls don't whistle. It's deemed inappropriate, and you're not a decent girl if you whistle. I was 6 or 7.
Okay.
Like, what the heck? And then I remember asking questions, and I was very nosy as a child because I followed my mom with her rebellious nature, and I didn't want to be kept in this box. So I asked my dad, I was like, why can't we sit in the boys section in the mosque? Why are we segregated? And my dad said, girls don't ask questions. So I was like, okay, which is odd to me because my dad, I loved him more than I loved my mother. I was terrified of my mother, extremely terrified of her. And my dad, I basically doted on him, and he used to have a secret stash of money in his office for me in a drawer, and it was a understanding without any verbal usage that every time I would empty it, he would fill it up, and I would go with a chauffeur and buy these toys at 6 years of age.
Wow.
Like a spoiled brat. And but I really doted on my dad, and I just assumed he loved me because he was my father. But he was not around much. He was very busy working because being a film producer, director, and a cameraman is a lot of work. But I just assumed that he loved me like my friends' dads did. My mother was completely different, and he was very emphatic on education, which is not, I don't know how it is now in 2016 in Pakistan, in wealthy societies and educated and intellectual societies, but I'm assuming that they're huge proponents of education, girl or boy. But I remember my father used to get very angry at me when I didn't do well in school. And he was a huge proponent for me to do well in school. He really wanted me to do well. And I always appreciate and love him for that fact, because I know that in that culture, in that society, you grow up, by 22 you're married and you have children, and you basically have this life of servitude for your husband and your children. And a lot of women and young girls do not know any better. That's how that culture functions, and they're happy. Believe it or not, they're happy.
Something that you just brought, it literally just popped into my head. But so my dad's side of the family is Syrian. It's Syrian and Italian.
Oh wow!
So yeah, it's an interesting.
That's an
combination.
that's an interesting mix.
But I would always notice when I was little, because I was a little girl that would put her hands on her hips and say, "You're not gonna talk to me like that."
Right.
But I would say things like that to my grandfather, or I was just always doing things out of turn or on my own little trajectory. And I think I asked my mom one time, I was like, why, we go to the family reunions or we go to whatever, and the women doted on the men. And I just always found that very interesting. It was So I was getting a squirrel context.
But I mean, let's not forget, in the 50s in the United States, it was the same culture.
Same thing.
It was if you see sometimes I go online and look at commercials.
Oh yeah.
From back in the day, and it was all catered to women in the kitchen, and men being the breadwinners, basically.
And it shows you how far we've come in the United States, and yet we are still. And
I have no qualms
in so many ways.
Absolutely, I have no qualms in saying that the current administration is taking us right back to where we were, and it breaks my heart. Also, as someone who suffers from severe back pain since I was 17. I fell off a horse and I hurt my back, and now my lower disc has collapsed, and it's a pre-existing condition.
Right.
So I'm terrified of the new healthcare bill, and I need the coverage for my back. So it's scary to where we might end up with this current administration.
I think we find that we're often in flux, and perhaps this is a wake-up call to. Obviously, we're seeing more people talking and more people rising up and speaking out and, and marching and sharing and blogging. Mm-hmm. So, this is the same kind of wake-up call. I get so frustrated with politics in general, having worked in the federal government.
Right.
It broke me permanently. But being able to, look at the spectrum of where we've been and where we're potentially going, and it can be very, very, very scary. Mm-hmm. But I try to look at it from that perspective of what they say: there's no rainbow without the rain, there's no sun without the storm, there's no, the darkness. It's only when you have darkness that you can see the light.
Right.
And I think that's the same thing, and with where we are with the domestic violence aspect and the human trafficking aspect, and there's a lot of people out there that are living in these really dark worlds, mm-hmm. and they feel like there's no way that they're ever going to escape,
right,
and no way that they're ever going to get out. And I think that you and I, in our own unique ways, are examples that you can get out of that darkness,
right,
and move into a much more beautiful, happy, fulfilling life.
I 100% agree with you, but I think that the fear is so severe that it holds people back, and
Definitely.
They're so terrified of being deported, coming back to the immigration policy. So domestic violence, I was talking to some friends that work with the police department, or just the Department of Homeland Security, or the case managers that take on these phone calls with sexual abuse and DV, and they said that the calls have dropped.
They have dropped
significantly.
The same thing.
Because,
and especially down here, we have such a high immigrant population.
Right. And Florida's number 3 with human trafficking. So it's so sad.
Real disconnect in people getting the services they need.
Right.
For fear that they will be sent back to.
Not that the cases have gone down, not that the crimes have gone down, but the calls have gone down.
Definitely, but they're afraid to seek out the help that
right,
they need.
Because they're afraid of. So there was an actual woman.
The lesser of the two evils.
It's so sad. And there was a woman that went to file a restraining order. I don't know if you saw this on the news. I saw it on Facebook. It was an article where she went to file a restraining order and they deported her. ICE arrested her, and that's scary. And a lot of people are not aware of the Violence Against Women's Act petition, which was ratified, I believe, in 1994. And I think Al Gore was behind it. And basically, if you're eligible to get a work permit and then a green card if you're a victim of sexual and physical abuse, and you're able to prove the abuse, and that's a very important petition. It's a very important act. And I'm just so afraid as a people and as a society that where we're going to end up with this current administration. It just really scares me for someone who gets out of bed every morning to try to do something to make me feel better. But I'm also helping other people. This is very therapeutic for me for what I do. It's extremely therapeutic. It's dangerous. It's draining. It's gratifying. It's therapeutic, and I couldn't think of a better way to live my life than doing No More Tears. So it's been an absolutely unbelievable journey. Like it's hard to describe.
Tell us more about what do you do? Tell like a typical day, or I guess there isn't really no typical day, but
right.
When you founded No More Tears, first of all, you said you had it for 10 years, correct?
So in 2007 of July or June, I believe, we got the letter from the IRS that you're now a 501c3.
Right. Okay, so that's your official...
Right,
yeah,
but till 2008, November of 2008, we didn't help anyone. It was November of 2008 when I did help the first victim. And my close friend Laura Finley was very involved, at that stage of No More Tears. She was actually our first board member. And it was such an interesting process. So you get this letter and you're approved from the IRS, and it's like you're ecstatic about it. And then you're like, now what do I do? Now I'm a nonprofit. What do I do? And I didn't have any training in running a nonprofit. I think when people start a nonprofit, they start it from the compassion that they have and just being good as a people and wanting to help other people. And what I did, I was like, okay, so there are victims that are brought from different countries to the U.S. They don't have any social support. They don't know where they are geographically. Initially, I tried to focus on India, Pakistan, because I spoke the languages. I've lived in both countries. I knew the culture very well. So I was like, and I was like, you know what? Let's use that as a demographic that I want to help, because I understand the languages and the culture. And I basically printed out brochures. I started approaching police departments and victim advocates. And I gave them the brochures. I went and met them, and they were very nice, very, very, extremely welcoming. Then I thought, okay, what am I going to do when I get a call for a victim that needs help? So I started approaching immigration attorneys and family law attorneys, because I realized Indian Pakistani women, some of them are brought through arranged marriages, some of them are love marriages, but anywhere there's ill treatment, I would like to help and potentially file for divorce to get the woman away from the abuser. So I knocked on many doors. From the moment we got approved by the IRS, I knocked on so many doors. Then I thought, I need a therapist. I need...
the list keeps growing.
Yeah, and I was like, I want to be a service provider. I want to have a model where no one is on a waiting list. That's something that we differentiate very, very significantly from various nonprofits, is we do not have a waiting list. So I wanted to provide immediate assistance. So I built this network. My best friend from college, we were in undergrad together, is our optometrist. She was studying optometry at the time. I was doing psychology. And I was like, hey, in some instances the women are punched in their eyes, or they have never had an eye exam, so will you be willing? Now, keep in mind, I did not make anyone do anything for free. There's a reason for that. So I tried the pro bono route. They will put the victim's file all the way at the bottom of the drawer. They will not call you back. And this is not anything against them. They have to earn a living. These are people that need to have an income. They have children. They have wives. They have families. They have bills. So it would be unfair.
And they get scared. And this is just from feedback that I've received when looking for attorneys. I actually have an attorney, family law attorney, that specifically said to me, I'll do a free consultation, but these domestic violence cases, as much as I want to help these people, they are the most difficult cases oftentimes and drag on the longest.
Oh yeah, we've had a case that went on for 5 years. Actually, she's right there in that photo. In my little home office here. And she's been very vocal. Her name is Betty. She's been very vocal about her case. She's actually been on TV for us, and she's given interviews for us. She's always giving us shout outs, and her case went on for 5 years. So it takes a long time, but I wanted to give them an incentive. So for example, if an attorney charges $3,500 as their retainer, I would give an immigration attorney $600. And for the whole case, which is a pretty good damn deal.
Right.
And so Callan Garcia is our immigration attorney. $600.
Okay.
$600,
Yeah.
and whereas his retainer would be $3,500.
Right.
And they're doing the Violence Against Women petition, which takes a lot of time. You have to accumulate evidence. You have to write a story.
It takes forever.
And then things are pending,
Yeah.
and then you have the fingerprints, and then you have the work permit, and all these interviews. So $600 is a very good deal. And Callan
that's a lot of
Garcia,
work.
I mean, I got lucky with him. He's one of the nicest people I've ever met. He's been with us for so long, about 7 years now. Before that, I had a few immigration attorneys, and they did one case, then they went away. But I am grateful to them for even doing that one case.
Yeah, somebody that they helped.
Right. And then we have Jason Haber and Carmen Soto, our two family law attorneys. They are our angels and a blessing, because if they charge $4,000 or $5,000, they charge No More Tears $800 to $1,000 max. And I'm willing to give them that money. So they prioritize my women and men in some instances, and there are custody cases, there's child custody, there's visitation, there's all sorts of stuff.
It spans just beyond the assault.
Exactly.
Right.
And then we have Dr. Cynthia Summers, who's our therapist in Broward. Then we have a young lady named Carmen that's here in Dade County, and we have really, really good people that have given their time at a very, very low discounted rate. So it took me a while to accumulate these people. And driving lessons. These women that are brought here are not allowed to drive, whether it's a trafficking victim or a domestic violence victim, because driving entails or potentially gives you a chance to freedom. So they don't know how to write checks. They don't know how to use the internet. So there's so many services. There's no service that we don't provide. Now, what I realized is not to undermine shelters. Shelters are amazing. I have a lot of respect for shelters. And there are some excellent organizations in Broward and Dade and Palm Beach. But I want to give the tools to the victims I want to teach them how to fish and how to fend for themselves. So I don't expect them to get their bachelor's and master's, given the state that they're in psychologically, but I can get them to get a home health aid certificate where they can take care of the elderly. So we work with Beacon Hill Nursing School. They give us an amazing discount. We enroll victims to go to nursing school, get the home health aid. They can do the certified nursing assistant course. We pay for all of that. That's where all the money goes. And I have to say this, that every dollar goes to the service providers. I don't take a dollar. Laura doesn't take any salary. Laura actually has given about $100,000 of her own money in the past 10 years to No More Tears. I've given my savings to No More Tears, which depleted in 2011, and I was like, holy shit, now what am I going to do? And that's when I started reaching out to rich people. Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly where I am.
Exactly. And you know what it's a very, very difficult mission to sell. I say it's easier to get money for abused dogs and cats than to get money for abused women and children, because you can show them. You can show the abused dogs and cats.
Well, and I think there's, again, that stigma that we talked about.
Right.
The dog, the cat is helpless.
Right, exactly.
The dog, the cat didn't ask for it. And I say that, you can't see the air quotes.
Right.
But oftentimes, there is still that belief that you're a full-grown woman or a full-grown man. If you don't like the situation you're in, just leave.
Exactly.
Just walk out. Why are you even staying in this situation?
I've had police officers say that to me. Why couldn't she just leave? And I was like, well, she was tied to a bedpost. She didn't know where she was geographically. She's from Jordan.
Right.
She didn't speak English. That's couple of reasons why she couldn't just leave. But it blows my mind how some of the cases and some of the caseworkers and the law enforcement remind me of when I lived in India and Pakistan, how you can get away with murder there. You can get away with a crime against a woman and a child. If you want to commit a crime, commit it against a woman and a child, because the likelihood of you getting away is about 100%. That's what I've learned in No More Tears. And it just really, really blows my mind.
It shouldn't be that way.
Right.
There's absolutely no excuse for that here.
Right. And
there's no excuse for it anywhere, but it's almost like you can say, well, there's cultural norms in place, or there's laws in place. And I'm one of those people that's always yelling back at people. I'm like, but do you understand that here we have laws? At least we have laws.
We have accountability. We have justice.
Exactly.
There are consequences to committing crimes. Bribery is not a norm in this country. It does occur.
It happens
in different aspects.
It's not a norm.
It's not a norm like India and Pakistan, where I grew up, where you get a ticket and you give the cop $10. And I'm kind of doing the currency, so $10 would be whatever. And you get away with it. They let you go. So it blows my mind. Just recently, I went to a police department, and the detective, the victim was trying to see him since November of 2016.
Oh my gosh, which is a lifetime when you're trying to leave.
Right, and it was a case of a child that was abused, and I kept going. I kept calling. She kept calling the detective. I called him. He answered my call, and before I could finish my sentence, he hung up on me. And we needed some forensic, some tape, and some for a hearing coming up. And I felt like, so I finally went to the police department with the survivor, and her and I are standing at this window, and there are two ladies that are extremely rude. Very, very, very disconnected, disengaged, hate their jobs, obviously.
Yeah.
And they're treating this woman who's already a victim very poorly, very rudely. And of course, they had a survey thing, so I picked it up and I wrote, wonderful. Yeah. And I stuck it in there. I was like, you know what? No. Enough. I'm not going to let this woman who's been coming here since November of 2016 trying to get in touch with this detective. So I wrote this survey, filled out the survey, and then we were able to achieve zero. They didn't help us. And
you wonder, and people wonder, I've said this before, and it was part of in my TEDx talk, I specifically said, why did I believe that nobody cared? Because society told me that nobody cared.
Right.
And it's irrelevant if that is factually true for every person that comes into your circle.
Mm-hmm.
The fact of the matter is when you experience things like that from the people that are supposed to be protecting you and serving you, what are you supposed to believe?
And
your issue isn't important.
And I went with her because this is someone who's suffers from PTSD. She's been abused very badly. She was also, she was just in a panic mode. And I went with her, and I was trying to be her voice, because I always believe that you have to be the voice for those that have a voice and they're screaming, but they're unheard on purpose. And I was trying to be her voice, and I realized that I was like losing it, because I was like, I do not ascertain why this woman cannot get what she needs when there's a hearing coming up.
Yes.
And this is a very important case. It involves a minor. So why are you not... And you're two women standing behind a window. You're two women who cannot empathize and relate to this young lady's problems. So it blows my mind. And I felt like I was in India. I was like, oh my God, this is like India. The apathy is like, it's horrible. But it exists here as well.
It exists everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that sad reality that is, and I think it's something, as I speak and have spoken and again walk in the circles of advocates and people that are working in this field, it's a constant frustration among those, and I find that those who have personally experienced abuse, you have your own story and you remember. At least for me, when I hear a quiet voice on the other end of the phone, or when I see that victim that's just can't express their story because they just don't even know how to put it in words yet.
Right.
And how that feels, like those feelings from being there and being in that position.
Well, you can empathize.
Exactly.
And if you're not, even if you're not a DV victim, you live through the law enforcement, you go through the court as a victim, you go to the courthouse as a victim advocate, and you are living their pain vicariously through them.
But there are people that apparently are able to shut that out completely, which is very, very problematic, but it happens daily.
Every day.
Whatever it is they have to tell themselves that allows them to block out those feelings so that they can go home at night and pretend like all of that didn't happen.
Right. And it's crazy to me, because when I started No More Tears, I was like, it's such an important mission. We're helping men, women, and children that are victims of violence. it's a no-brainer. People would want to donate. And I was like, I want to do this campaign where I was trying to set a goal, and I have no background in marketing, no expertise in fundraising, zero, absolutely zero. No expertise in media. I just basically led with my heart. That's what I did. And I was like, I want 10,000 people to sign up for $10 a month. They can give $10 a month. Yeah. It's not a lot. I had 58 people sign up. I did this 3 years ago. But this is 3 years ago. Yeah. And in 3 years, I had only 58 people sign up. I'm very grateful to those donors. I'm grateful to the big donors that give 500, 1,000, or 5,000. There's a lady in New York who's a cardiologist, and she sends us $5,000 every year, and I'm so grateful to her.
Because that goes so far in helping.
It does, and every dollar counts, and we're a unique nonprofit where 100% goes to the service providers for the victims that are fighting for them. So no one is on a salary. So it's, I was so sad that I couldn't even achieve 100 people. Only 58 people signed up. So if anyone that's hearing this, please go on our website, nomoretearsusa.org, sign up. It's $10 a month. We spend that in a day on coffee. So I urge people to please sign up.
And I want to specify, when you say on coffee, where are you buying that coffee for? Because somebody out there is going to say, oh, what, you're buying coffee for your office?
Exactly.
No, you're going to explain, that you...
So that's where I meet the victims.
One-on-one.
Yeah, so a little backstory to this. So about 4 years ago, we used to have an office in Broward. That's where I used to meet the victims, and the likelihood of the victims being followed was very high. However, in this instance, I'm assuming she was followed. I don't know who it was, but a guy walked in with a gun, pointed it right at me, and he said, "Consider this a warning," and took off, and I froze. My heart was in my stomach, and I was like, okay, can't have this office anymore. And then, of course, someone, I don't know if it was the same person, but they find out where I live. The mailbox is completely thrashed, and it was a cement mailbox. The car was keyed, the tires were slashed, and I was like, I have to get out of here. I can't live here anymore, and I have to pick up and move elsewhere and start from there, and basically build No More Tears from that place now. But anyway, so I couldn't meet the victims because we didn't have an office. I have a home office, but the days are very different. You were asking about No More Tears as days. So, for example, this week I will be meeting with a victim that was sexually assaulted, and she wants to go sign up in Miami-Dade College and go to school, and she needs therapy. So our therapist will give her therapy, and she doesn't know how to go alone and sign up and do the financial aid. So I'm going to go with her to do that. Then, I'll go in for a restraining order hearing to court with the victim as a victim advocate, and I will sit there just to give her the emotional support. Then I will take a victim to sign up for driving lessons because she wasn't allowed to drive. We'll go to the bank and open up a $50 bank account for her. She's never had a bank account. So every day varies. There are days where I don't leave my home office. I'm on the phone all day referring victims to our service providers. So if someone needs an immigration attorney, I would be like, here's Callan Garcia's number. Please call and make an appointment. So every day varies. But there's nothing more gratifying than this work. And it is gratifying to a selfish degree because it makes you feel so good. And your dopamine level goes high when you help people. At least for me personally, I feel so good about myself. And I always say that there is an element of selfishness to altruism because it makes you feel so good about yourself. You're like, hey, I help people today. It's a high like no other, at least for me.
I find the same thing. To me, some of the most rewarding moments are when I talk in front of somebody, in front of a group, whatever, and somebody comes up and says, thank you, I've been there, but I've never talked about it.
Wow.
And they give you a hug for sharing your story, and that's all it is, just knowing that you touched somebody to the point that they're now coming to a peer group, or you can now refer them to a therapist and they can get the help that they need because you've let them know that you're not alone.
Right.
You don't have to carry this burden with you forever. You don't have to stay in that position. And getting people to where they're on that path, wherever on that path they are, just getting them on that path
is phenomenal.
To me, it's just one of the most amazing feelings.
It's like an adrenaline rush.
Yes,
it's like amazing. I'll give you an example. I was in Target about a week ago, and this guy helped me with the bags, and he said, "Are you Somy?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "I'm this person," and I was like, "I'm sorry, I it's not ringing a bell." And he's like, "About 5 years ago, you paid." You gave me a $5,000 scholarship. I was raped, and he belonged to the LGBT community. And I was like, I did? And then he's like, yeah. And I was like, wow, we must have been rich 5 years ago. We must have been loaded. And he's like, yeah, that scholarship helped me finish nursing school.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, can I give you a hug? Like, I'm so happy. You just made me feel so happy about myself. And instances like those, that's what makes this worth every minute.
Definitely.
Every minute of the danger it comes with, the draining, the elements of the chances of certain victims going back to the abusers, that's very high.
Yes.
Fortunately, so we have 3,437 victims thus far in 9 years. This is our 10th year. Only 2 went back. Those are pretty amazing statistics.
Huge.
Yeah,
yes,
those stats are very
Those stats are very low.
Right.
That's fantastic.
Right. And I think there's a reason behind that, is because we are giving them the tools.
Yes.
We are not, and not undermining shelters by any means, but we're not just giving them a bed.
Well,
we are giving them tools.
Yes, and there are different people that have different needs.
Right.
And some people are in that position where that's what their immediate need is. Their immediate need is that they need
a shelter. Right.
They need somebody to take in them and their children, their pet, their whatever. They need that stability at home so that they can then take the stuff.
Well, they need to get out of danger.
Exactly. That's their immediate need. And everybody's situation is different. I can speak for myself as well as people that have come to our peer group. I kind of shunned shelters.
Mm-hmm.
I was an independent woman. I was actually the breadwinner for most of my marriage.
Right.
So whenever we actually turned around I actually turned around and left, I was like, I don't need a shelter. Shelters are for women with children and people that are, risking their life by leaving or...
Right.
The irony is, it wasn't until years later that I looked back and said, oh, wow, yeah, I was risking my life by leaving.
Yeah.
I was doing some crazy, not thought through, I didn't have a safety plan. I just up and left. I told him I was up and leaving. I was lucky in that I believed that he was in such shock that he didn't act.
Right.
And then he didn't know where I was. So...
But shelters are very pivotal.
Yeah,
they're extremely pivotal.
But then you have those.
But then the issue
is to be independent.
But also the shelters are often full,
and that is especially here.
The biggest issue I get with police officers or victim advocates that call me. They say, "Somy, the shelters are full." And so what we fulfill is we provide 4 nights emergency stay in a safe space.
Perfect.
And because majority of the times the shelters are full, when we have the women, men, or children in these shelters or our safe space for 4 nights. During that time is when I find a shelter.
Right.
There's always a bed that opens up.
Yeah, something opens.
And when they're in that shelter is when we start their the whole transformation phase.
Supplemental pieces.
Right. The immigration attorney, family law attorney, driving school, nursing school. The list goes on and on.
Well, I think the sad reality is that, and it's maybe something people don't understand. They'll say, "Oh, well, there are people that do that. There are shelters. There are this. There are that. There are, there are church groups. Mm-hmm. There are whatever that will take care of the people in need."
Right.
But the reality is, there are so many people in need.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So many people in need. The numbers are just off the charts to the point that no one organization can support
all of them.
All of them.
There's too much.
Yes.
There are more victims than donors. There are more victims than nonprofits. Yeah, exactly. But another thing I noticed, coming from a Muslim background, that Muslim women are reluctant to go to shelters because they are timid, and they have different personalities. They tend to be more shy, more introverted, and they're afraid to go to shelters. So I have to applaud shelters that cater to specific cultures. There's Noor Center, it's Noor, which is in Miami, which is an excellent shelter that caters to South Asians. So it's Indians and Pakistani victims. And that's good, because I think they are reluctant to leave because they don't know how to fit in. They're afraid. And when they know that there's a place like the Noor Center, they are more likely to take that, make that first move and get out of the abusive situation.
Well, what is almost a first response to almost anyone? If home is a comfortable place, if where you grew up is a good place, and I don't mean your physical house that you lived in, I don't even mean your family, but we all, I think, when you are at your worst or you're the most uncomfortable, it's built into us to want to be where we feel the most at peace, and that's what we know, whatever that is,
right?
So I think that is an amazing thing that we have here in South Florida that so many places might potentially lack, especially as they become the more rural areas of the United States, is that we have such a diverse culture down here. I think a lot of people that aren't from here think that Miami is just a Latin culture. It's my favorite. It's a mini Cuba.
Oh God!
And it is so not.
God, it's
it
not.
It is so not. It is such a diverse culture. You have people from every single walk of life here, and the nonprofit organizations, as someone who is fairly, again, new to these circles, are just amazing in that respect, because you have all of your city and county and state-run, organizations that cater to specific needs, but you also have cultural groups that come together and create these safe spaces, not just for abuse victims,
but in general,
Yeah, and it's
they're
really
very,
awesome
very
thing.
important. They're
Definitely.
significantly, because, like I said, the woman will not make the first move or take the first step, rather, get out of that abusive situation. So they're important.
Let's talk about that, and this is, as you know, it's near and dear to my heart. But let's talk about the domestic violence aspect and why don't we say women often, because women are the bulk of the people that we hear about as being victims. There do tend to be more physical victims of physical abuse that are women, but men are almost on par with women for the number of men and women that have experienced abuse at the hands of an intimate partner. But let's talk about that. Why don't victims leave?
Well,
I know there's 1,000,001 reasons, but I want to talk about
there's so many reasons. I think that the first 5 reasons: they don't have financial support, they don't have social support, they don't have family support, they have children, and they're told that they will be killed. Fear
is huge.
And with my women that are undocumented, they're afraid of being deported and losing their children. So there's so many elements. Look, if a woman is being abused physically or verbally, she is already damaged psychologically. She's beaten down emotionally and literally, and she's terrified to begin with. On top of that, she has children. On top of that, she's undocumented. She doesn't have an income. She doesn't know how to gain an income. She's been kept in a home and not allowed to have friends, learn how to drive, do anything, have a social life. So there's so many elements as to why a woman won't leave. And I have shouted this out loud till I turn blue in the face, but I still have only 58 people giving $10 a month.
Yeah.
It blows my mind.
I want to focus on No More Tears today because that's why we're here to talk to you, but I'm hearing this across the board, and I'm hearing this again from the local in the States, and even like Parks and Rec, that trying to get funding is such a huge issue. But, we're not in a society anymore where the community comes together and takes care of their friends and their loved ones. And that, to me, is kind of sad in its own right. But we are in a society where there's a lot of really good people trying to make a change, trying to change the perception. And, they're out there and they're giving their all to do this. And I feel like it's a constant battle. I'm where you were in where you said 2011 or 2008, where I'm thinking, oh wow, my savings is gone. Like I might have enough to pay the bills for another month, and and I'm scrambling to make ends meet, but I'm not willing to give up what I'm doing because I know where I was. And even for me, when I talk to victims or advocates and you talk about all the reasons that people don't leave abusive relationships, and I think, wow, like none of that applied to me except the fear and the emotion. And, I was, like I said, I was an independent woman. I was the breadwinner. I did everything. I was completely 100% capable of being on my own. From a financial and, independent standpoint. But emotionally, I was incapable. Emotionally, I felt that I would fail at life, that everything I touched, because that's what I had been told for years.
And it's your programming.
Yes.
You were programmed.
Exactly. And we talk about that all the time. Forget me not, is you need to rewire your brain, because that's exactly, our brains are computers. That's exactly what we're doing.
And okay, let's say you are a citizen. You were born here. Let's say you don't have kids. But you are told that you will be killed, and a family member of yours will be murdered if you step a foot out of this house. I mean,
animals.
You have dogs and cats.
Yes.
There are a million reasons.
71%, just to throw out a statistic. We're going to talk about statistics. But 71% of women that are interviewed at shelters say the reason they didn't leave was because of family pets. Because if abuse is happening in the house or in the home,
of course,
the abuse is happening to everybody. It's happening to the children. It's happening to the pets. It's all encompassing.
I had a guy, the case I was telling you about with the minor and the lady I was at the police department for the other day. Her husband kicked the dog to death. In the living room, in front of the children, in front of two little kids and the wife. Just kicked the dog to death because he was annoyed by its bark. These are not normal individuals. These are people that are sociopaths. They're sadistic. They're narcissistic. They have mental ailments. They need to be treated. They have anger issues. In many instances, they were abused severely as children. These are very dangerous people. So when you say, why couldn't she just leave? You really need to look at yourself in the mirror and think about what you said.
And I think that's, that's so important because, we all, growing up, we hear, at least here, I don't know if there's a similar Pakistani saying, but is it sticks and stones may break your bones?
Right.
And the words, I am floored, even to this day, if I share, at least every other time I share my story in front of a group of people, somebody will say to me personally, well, I don't understand why you didn't just leave.
Oh my God.
I just got done telling you why I didn't leave. But they'll say it to your face, or, and I think that, as a society, and again, this goes across, whatever your tightly held belief system is, no matter what it is, I think the best we can do as humans is to realize that we don't know everything, number one.
Of course.
Everybody, I had somebody describe it to me so perfectly, is let's just say that we're all standing in a circle and we're watching the exact same event. You still have to remember that I'm at one point in the circle and everybody else is at a completely different point on the circle. Therefore, their view of the event is different.
Right.
So, our culture, our religion, our upbringing, our experiences, they all create these different views. And what you say to people, it really does affect them.
Mm-hmm.
And, even it might elicit a different response from me now than it did then. But back when I was in the relationship and a show would be on TV or there was a PSA announcement or there was a poster,
right,
and somebody would just make an offhanded comment about, I just don't understand why women stay with men that beat them.
I had someone in a gym tell me that when I told her what I did, she was like, I'm a badass. I'm sorry, I'm a fucking badass. Like, if someone fucked with me, I would fucking slap them or walk right out. And I was like, this person has no idea and is speaking like an ignorant individual at the moment.
Exactly.
This person is oblivious. It doesn't matter if you're a badass. My mom was a badass. She was a rebel. She was not someone who stayed at home and wore the traditional outfits. She went to discos, they were called back then in Pakistan. And she went to discos. She had rich friends who were educated. They were abused. It doesn't matter if you're a badass. That makes no difference.
My dad's words to me, and it was completely out of love, but he says, I need to understand. He said, if anybody else did what he did to you, you would have knocked their teeth down their throat for them.
Yeah.
What made him different?
Right.
I didn't have an answer. But it's the honest to goodness truth. And it's irrelevant how you are perceived by society. It's irrelevant how the abuser is perceived by society, because some of the most abusive individuals in the home are some of the most respected, renowned, and
famous,
loved
celebrities.
Exactly.
Yeah. And they're gods. They have fans that worship them. And look at Ray Rice. Look what he did in the elevator.
Yep. And people will still excuse it.
Unbelievable. And look at Michael Vick, what he did to those poor animals.
Oh, you don't even want to get me started.
Yeah, exactly. But, I want to talk about the verbal abuse, because that's very, very important.
Definitely.
And it really stays with you. To date, there are times where I'm so insecure about, let's say I gave a talk or I gave an interview, and I would ask my brother, hey, can you take a look at this and see if I sound okay? Do I sound silly? Do I sound dumb? And he's like, what? He's like, come on. But because I was told as a child, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're dumb, repeatedly, since as far back as I can remember, that stays in your brain. No matter how much of an education, no matter how many accolades or proclamations you receive, that insecurity, that verbal abuse stays. It stays, man. It does not leave you. And if you are in a relationship where there's verbal abuse outside of the foundation that you were brought up in, that's a double whammy. You're fucked. You're pretty fucked.
It comes full circle.
Right.
And even, and my experience is, my family, I had very supportive, still very supportive, always said how proud they were of me or how good I was doing. They didn't expect me to be an overachiever. I was who I was, and that was all great and wonderful and dandy. Mm-hmm. But then my marriage, now I was with him from the time I was very young, I was 16, but, we talked about the video and the talk, and the first time I watched it, all I could see was my body. Mm-hmm. Because that's what stuck with me.
Right.
Because that's what he constantly pointed out to me. Mm-hmm. And it's like you said, I'm personally 8 years out. You're obviously several years out. Those things don't go away. Nope. Something happens, you see something.
You are damaged goods.
Yep.
And you got to make sure that you work it. With those being a damaged goods, you got to work it.
I always say it's like we see ourselves as damaged goods, but
right.
We're not. We're
right.
just we're a little tarnished.
Yeah.
And we're
resilient.
We need to shine ourselves up a little bit.
We're badasses. We've been through a lot of shit.
Exactly.
That makes us stronger.
It does.
But coming back to the verbal abuse, it's very, very sad, and it will not ever, to date, leave me. It won't.
And you know what? It's something else that I have noticed. I remember looking and trying to get out. I shouldn't say trying to get out. That's probably the wrong words to use. Trying to figure out what was wrong with my marriage.
Right.
And, sadly enough, even to date, if you Google domestic violence and you click on images, almost all of it is going to come up with photos of the woman who's in the corner, of the black eyes, of the map, of
the eye stock photos.
It's all physical. There's more and more stuff out there showing the verbal, the emotional,
financial,
the psychological, the financial, the sexual. There's so much to it, and but because of years of ingraining in our society, we've taught society in a way that domestic violence is physical.
Right.
And oftentimes it is. And even if it isn't to begin with, as years or months go on, it very often does escalate to physical.
Right.
But it's not always visible. Like I said, again, my husband was respected. He had a good job. He had good friends. People loved him. He was funny. He was entertaining. He was a good person, and that he wanted to help other people all the time. He made a point of not tarnishing that perception of himself. If he got angry enough with me to physically attack me, he made sure it didn't show.
Right.
I say, he had his favorite little things, like punches to the kidneys or to the gut,
or to the head. I've seen that with a lot of victims.
Hurts a lot.
Yes.
Pain inflicts fear, inflicts power and control. But nobody else can see it.
Exactly. And the verbal abuse, coming back to it. Again and again.
It's a slow form of manipulation.
It's so scary. And okay, when you're a child and someone repeatedly calls you dumb, you start believing it.
Imagine, of
and
course.
You grow up to be a very insecure person.
Of course.
And then you end up in India and you're in a relationship with someone who you thought you were supposed to be with because you had a dream about it. You're a moron, of course, but you're also 16. And the awe of the celebrity dissipates in literally a month of being in the relationship, and you see this completely different person. Then there's also the choice. Okay, am I going to stay with this person who I was supposed to be with? Or am I going to go back to America? And I was supposed to have this fairy tale of a relationship. I have no life in America. I dropped out of school. I used to hang out with the bad kids. I have a mother who is kind of apathetic, verbally abusive. So do I stay with this verbal abuse, or do I go back to that verbal abuse? And you're 16 trying to make that decision. It's very, very, very sad that many of us go through this, and people are oblivious. People are oblivious to what human trafficking is, how prevalent it is
and
here.
We haven't talked about that. Let's talk about that, because this is something else that No More Tears has a huge impact on and a huge focus on here in this area. So, and misunderstood, I think, even more than domestic violence. So
I think the best way for me to describe human trafficking is for me to narrate a few of my cases. So I will start with the one that really stood out the most in terms of just horrible. There was a young girl, she was 19, and she answered a Craigslist ad for modeling. She ended up in Miami. I forget what state she came from, but that's irrelevant. She comes here, goes to the studio to basically go for the photo shoot. It was an audition or something. Goes in there, she's given coconut water, which is sealed, and it was roofied. So she passes out, and she wakes up, and she finds herself in a dog cage naked. She was raped by numerous people. She was trafficked for about 4 years. And basically she got away somehow. She told the guy that was her date, which is the actual, sexual encounter they have that they're sold for, they're called dates.
Okay.
She told the guy that she's gonna get cigarettes for him and for herself, and that's how she called the national human trafficking hotline, and she was able to get away. That's one of our cases. So Craigslist, the internet, they get lured on Facebook. Kids, young girls or boys, runaways. A lot of runaways end up in trafficking. Look, human trafficking is the most profitable business after drug trafficking, drug issues.
And I think that's something to talk about, because people know that drugs are a huge issue.
Right.
When it's, but and then people will say, like, why do these people get into these certain areas?
Right.
It's because it's profitable.
Of course.
And human trafficking is second.
It's severely profitable. And, these are young girls and boys that are being sold. They have been sold in instances over 1,000 times. And it has no prejudices. It affects every single young boy or woman or girl or man all over the world. Florida ranks number 3 after leaving California and Texas behind. Florida is number 3 in human trafficking. And that's a very, very big problem. Backpage, backpage.com. Yes. That's an online where they basically sell or advertise for these young girls that in many instances are minors. It's just horrible. These social media, the internet, I advise all my friends that have children, please monitor your kids' social media. It's very dangerous out there. Really, really. We had a girl who basically made friends with someone on Facebook because she had a fight with her mom. The friend was a lady. It was a woman. Keep in mind that a lot of the women work for the pimps to hook these young girls and the young boys. And she had a fight with her mom, and this lady said, I can help you get out. She had her meet her somewhere, took her to a motel. The minute she walked into the motel, the lady sat on the couch, and this guy knocked her out cold, just punched her, this young girl. And once again, she woke up, drugged up. They injected her with heroin or I don't know what drug. But she was raped by this pimp, and then she was taken all over the U.S. in a car from one motel to another until she was able to get away. It has no prejudices. It happens locally, it happens nationally, it happens globally. And we must do something about it.
And I think a lot of people have this idea in their head, again, that human trafficking isn't that big of an issue here. That it's something that happens in other countries, or that the people that become victims of human trafficking are only from other countries and brought here.
Right.
That, that you don't need to have these conversations with your teenagers or your even younger. I just had a conversation with a young girl that I work with who has nothing to do with any of this, but, I was putting her in an Uber and just having a conversation about, what do you do if you feel uncomfortable and you're in the back seat of an Uber?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because, we don't want to scare our children.
Right.
And we don't want to be what people like to refer to as helicopter parents, where we won't let them out of our sight. But we need to educate them on safe practices.
Absolutely.
Like you said, monitor their social media, because it is happening here.
And it's happening all through the internet. Yeah. A lot of it is happening. They're getting lured in by social media. They find them on the internet. In some instances, the kids want to be Britney Spears, so they leave a place like, let's say, Kentucky and come to Miami or go to New York, a big city. They want to be stars. They want to be celebrities, the role models that they look up to. There's so many cases of human trafficking, and I feel like we need to talk about it. Coming back to the public service announcements, there need to be more. There need to be human trafficking PSAs, sexual abuse of children PSAs.
Definitely.
Why is there such a stigma to talk about being sexually abused as a child? I do not, for the life of me, comprehend that.
It's a shame issue. I mean, and you
right.
know that. Like, I'm telling you, like, you don't know that. But I mean, for the sake of our listeners, the whole reason we're doing these podcasts is because we want people to have an understanding. nobody wants to talk about these subjects. You know, we don't want to constantly talk about what happened to us because, yes, it does. It drudges up old, sad feelings, and it does bring up those insecurities, and it does, you know, have that element that you'd sooner just leave it in the past where it, you know, quote unquote belongs.
Right.
Let go of it and move on with your life. But the reality is that if we all just let go of everything and move on with our lives, and we refuse to talk about anything, that we just allow all of this to just flourish because it grows rampantly in silence.
Well, you know, the worst thing is that when you're aware of something, a problem that exists, and you do absolutely nothing about it. That's in my opinion, I have no respect for a person like that. If you have a platform to be the voice for those that do not have a voice. When I went to the police department and I became the voice of this woman, it didn't take a lot for me to do it. It was simply commuting. And, you know, just to be the voice of someone who was scared to speak up.
And that meant the world to her.
And she was so happy. And we really need to be the voice of the people that, for example, children that are abused. You know, they're helpless. Someone told me the other day that there's online, it's a peer-to-peer server where you basically have live children, and there are 3 cameras, and men are paying from all over the world for other men to do things to these children. In some instances, these children, the men demand to kill them, and that gives them sexual pleasure. It blew my mind when someone told me this. I want
to make sure I understand this.
Yes.
Because this is the first I've heard of this. I mean, there's very few things that
so a friend of mine
anymore, but you're saying, so the people that are watching remotely are voting or asking for specific things to be done
to the children, in some instances,
even
torture them to a level to be murdered, to kill them. And a friend of mine, her son found out about this in college, and he was traumatized, and he told his mom.
I imagine.
And she told me, she said, Somy, and I was like, look, I know that things are done online to children, child pornography, all of that. That I'm all aware of with my work. That I know, because I've seen it. But to kill them? This is brand new. I've never heard of this. So the internet, as amazing as it is from a knowledge research perspective, connecting to family and friends globally, and building relationships and building businesses and promoting your mission and your nonprofits, there's a very dark, secretive world out there that is hurting children, hurting young girls, hurting young boys. It's very dangerous, and it's really scary. And these are peer-to-peer servers. It's weird. They're private servers, and it's like an underground world. It just blew my mind. It's like traumatizing.
Not everything. I have so much on the internet. You think the internet is, again, it's the World Wide Web, right?
Right.
It is accessed by people all over, and there are so many people out there that are. I mean, Google hires hackers to try to break into their system.
Right.
You know, there's reasons for that, and there's an entire, like you said, there's an entire underworld, you know, on the internet of things that go untouched and inaccessible and untrackable.
People get away with it.
And they get away with it for those reasons, or because it's out of jurisdiction, or because the resources aren't there. But
they just don't know about it.
Affecting. Yeah. I'm saying it's untouched, it's untrackable. You can't even find it unless you are in the know that it's there,
and it's
you
so
have access.
Scary. It's really, really scary. But coming back to the nonprofit aspect of, you know, you have a nonprofit, I have a nonprofit. We will be 10 this year. I want to plug our 10-year anniversary gala, if that's okay.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
So October 1st, we have a brunch from 12 to 3 p.m. It's called the Heart in Hand Awards. So it's heartinhandawards.org. So our logo has a heart in the hand. So please purchase the tickets. It's our 10-year anniversary. We would love to have all of you here, at the event, because we really need the funding.
I'm going to get this information from you offline, and we'll add it to the written portion,
so people
of the
can see a
podcast,
URL.
so they can see it and click on it, and
that would be great,
and not have to actually remember it. But we'll share all that.
That will be great.
Yes.
So coming back to nonprofits, it's such a struggle. It has been such a struggle. I mean, 10 years it's been like this. up and down. It's been like a crazy graph where all of a sudden we're inundated with funds. All of a sudden we have $5 in the account.
Well,
there's no
inundated,
consistency.
Well, and even so, even let's just say that you had a never-ending supply of money.
Right.
You have a never-ending supply of victims that need services. So it's not like there is enough is enough. And when you have nothing financially,
right. It's a very bad place to be in, because the worst thing I want to do to a victim or a case manager is say, I'm sorry, we don't have the funds right now. That's my biggest nightmare, and unfortunately I've been through that 3 times running No More Tears, because funds just deplete. There are too many people in need, and we need those service providers. We need to pay them to help the victims, to prioritize their files. It's really, really tough.
We touched on this earlier, and I actually, ironically, saw a post on LinkedIn about it from a lady I didn't know, but she was talking about small business.
Right.
And I'll give it to you in a nutshell because I can't remember it verbatim, but
right.
She said, why is it that whenever a celebrity has a pair of shoes or a new perfume line or a t-shirt or whatever it is that they create, we promote it, we share it, we like it on social media, we buy it, we want our children to have it, whatever the case may be, we're all about it.
Right.
But whenever a friend or a family member starts a small business, and again, she was specifically talking about small business, she says, we don't hit the like button. We don't hit the share button.
It's unbelievable.
Is it because we don't believe in their product? Is it because we don't really like them as a person, even though they're our friend or our relative? She says, really, it's kind of all irrelevant. If you're willing to promote celebrity status to somebody that already has millions and millions and millions, why? She says, even if you don't want to buy the product of your friend or family member, give them the backing that they need to get the word out there. And I know that's something that I've griped a lot about, and I try not to be whiny on the topic.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, just something as simple as sharing a link, liking something on Facebook, retweeting a tweet is huge, because just think, if 100 people that you know share the information that you've put out there about your nonprofit, about the work you're doing, about the needs that you have, then that's how many other thousands of people that then see it. I mean, just something
it's a ripple effect.
It's a ripple effect.
Right.
And, that goes to the funding as well.
Right.
Because if, organizations like No More Tears are not able to help people and without funding.
Right.
Other organizations, like Forget Me Not, we do educational services.
Right.
But the reality of it will always be that without staff on hand, we can't provide education.
Right.
I would love personally to be able to work forever for free and do nothing but goodwill.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you still have to pay rent and utilities, and and we would love to have our own space where we can host our classes and have an empowerment. Nonprofits need money.
But you know what I've also noticed, nonprofit to nonprofit, and I respect you because you do not have that mindset, but I've noticed that nonprofit to nonprofit are very competitive.
Yes.
They have a lot of jealousy,
true.
They have a lot of animosity, and I've experienced this personally by people that are, above and beyond in terms of they've been around for 40, 50 years, and I'm just like 9 years old. But I've experienced that, the cattiness, for lack of a better term.
It's out there for sure.
You can do why don't we collaborate and do events? All you have to do is split the proceeds 50-50. It's not rocket science.
We're definitely going to be doing that. Because
collaborate and do events. You can do so much more together than doing it alone.
The irony of what I see is that I have yet to come across any 2 organizations that are doing exactly the same thing. And if they're even remotely on the same, let's just say shelters, for instance, because there are a lot of shelters. Who cares? Yes, you're all providing shelter, but guess what? Shelter A doesn't have enough beds, and shelter B doesn't doesn't have enough beds, so why would you not promote and support and help Shelter C get on their feet?
Right.
Because that's how we help people, and you know what? The end game is helping people.
Yeah, but they have this monopoly on their mission.
Yeah.
And they have this monopoly on it's just us and we rule and we want all the grants and we want all the money. We will refer victims to you when our shelters are full.
We can't.
but we won't collaborate with you and do an event. And that's fucking bullshit. That is complete bullshit.
It happens a lot.
We need to collaborate and do things together because you can do more. Look, in all honesty, granted I had my savings to initiate No More Tears. In all honesty, if it weren't for the donors, No More Tears would have died in 2011. That's it. If it weren't for the service providers, No More Tears would not exist. There would be no More Tears. So, granted I started this, but I could have not accomplished an iota what I did without the donors, without the board members, without the volunteers, the interns, the supporters. There's no way. The social media people that post what I post, if I want a microwave for a victim, a friend will share it. All of this it's all a combination of numerous ingredients to cook to have a fantastic meal. That's what nonprofit is. That's the lovely part of it, the wonderful part of it. Why can't other nonprofits that are successful take in nonprofits that have just begun doing their work, mentor them, do collaborative events with them? That's like someone going to apply for a job that has never had a job, and they're like, well, you've never worked before.
It's probably almost worse because, as you mentioned earlier, the reality is a lot of us that go out and have this great idea that we're going to start a nonprofit.
Right.
We're flying blind. I mean, I'm like you. I've never had a nonprofit. I mean, if people that know me personally on Facebook,
right.
I mean, sometimes people go, Amy, stop talking. Stop talking. You're not helping your cause.
Right.
And I'm like, no. It is reality. We're going to say exactly what we're talking about now. This is a group effort, and if you think that all of, it's just like people talk about taxes, and I don't want to go down the tax rabbit hole, but people talk about taxes and say, well, I don't want to pay more taxes, but I definitely want the police, fire, and EMS to show up when I have an accident. Well, who do you think pays for that?
Right.
Tax dollars pay for that.
Right.
It's the same concept. We want this community of do-gooders to help those that are less fortunate, to help those that are in predicaments, to support whatever it is that our cause is. It's really irrelevant. If it speaks to your heart, then you should be supporting it in some way. And if you can't financially support it, you can definitely, support it with in-kind donations. You can support it with volunteer hours. You can support it strictly on social media.
Right.
Social media is such a massive platform for marketing for nonprofits because it's free. And, I know that you believe as I do, that it's like the last thing, when we do an event, like I've even put things out there, it's like if we're having an event to raise money, we are not spending money on that event.
Right.
Everything is donated because we believe that money needs to be spent on other more important things.
Well, I think the worst trait of human beings is the trait of jealousy.
Yes.
And that the jealousy trait demolishes relationships.
It
does. It destroys families. It destructs you as a human being. And if you have that jealousy trait as the founder and the CEO and the president of a nonprofit, it's going to affect your nonprofit.
Definitely.
Basically. I mean, you can be getting millions of dollars in grants, but if you're not in a good place emotionally and as a human being, and your moral compass is completely off, it affects it. Inevitably, it affects it. So I think, I always say that one element of that jealousy trait that I see that in women as well, outside of nonprofit world, where they're catty and they're bitchy and they're hurtful and they're mean girls, basically. Whereas if we get together, empower one another, and care about each other, we can accomplish so much more rather than competing with one another.
And that's, that's spot on.
Right.
Because when you find the people, and I had this conversation just yesterday with another woman. She's not in the nonprofit realm, but she's in an organization that relies heavily on funding and grant money. And she said, you know what? She says, I learned a long time ago, honey. She's been in the game for a long time. She says, I've learned a long time ago. Mm-hmm. She says, we have to help each other out. Because she goes, you have things that I need, I have things that you need, you're doing stuff that we're not, you're doing stuff that those people aren't, and they're doing stuff that you're not. And the only way that we're going to help this community right here mm-hmm. is when we band together and we combine our resources and we are the change. We make change.
Right.
And, I will beat this horse. I will beat it dead because I will say over and over again that, we have to be the change. We have to be the voice. We have to share. We have to speak up. We have to stand out.
We simply have to care. We have to give a fuck.
And when
people are dying out there.
Exactly. And when you do that, and when you because a lot of people that are hearing this, you guys are going to say, well, I care.
Give $10. If you care, give $10 freaking dollars.
Give some money. Give your effort. And, because just those it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't matter how small it is.
Right.
Every dollar counts.
Absolutely.
Every time somebody comes to a table and shares information about an organization that helps, every like on Facebook helps. Every little thing that you do helps. And
yeah, okay, for example, food stamps. When we get a victim, we provide her the 4 nights emergency stay if she's unable to get a shelter.
Right.
What is she supposed to do to eat in those 4 nights?
Exactly.
So, if you don't want to give money, send Publix gift cards for $50, $20, $30, $100. Send Walmart gift cards. Target. These women don't have sanitary napkins. They don't have toilet paper. They don't have toothbrushes. They don't have toothpaste. They don't have anything. A friend of mine, her name is Gabby Muniz, she just put a post out there for us and her friends about, I think, 10 women.
That was awesome.
Oh my God.
That was awesome.
I am so grateful to this young lady. She's beautiful inside out. She went and told her friends, and they collected, I think, over 40 boxes of just miscellaneous items: shampoo, conditioner, toilet paper, toothbrush, toothpaste, hairbrush. These are things that we need.
And they're so simple. It's such a simple gesture.
Right. Another friend of mine, Soledad, these are all women that are on the committee of the gala that we have in October. Amazing, amazing women. Completely doing this for free, only from the goodness of their hearts. So she gave $500 public gift cards, $100 each. That's a lot. That really helps us. These women and children don't have food.
Right.
I have to take them to get groceries if they're staying in a 4-night emergency stay shelter.
Eat something.
Right. When you apply for food stamps, it takes a while.
It takes time.
You don't get them right away. So there's so many ways for people to help, but people have to. Of course, our biggest drawback is our apathy.
Yes.
We have to stop being apathetic. We have to care. If you're blessed and you have a roof over your head, you can sit at home and drink Merlot and watch Netflix, you better be fucking giving $10 to a nonprofit. I don't care if it's No More Tears, if it's yours, if it's PETA, if it's whatever. Give back. As a human being, it is incumbent upon us to give back if we are blessed. That's my motto. That's what I live by. You have to give back.
And I can't even add to that. So let's just wrap it up there, because you know what? I think we've talked about a whole lot, and again, the whole purpose of this podcast is for people to get a better understanding of what issues are out there, what people are doing about it, and how they can help. So you've given us a lot of ways that they can help, and that's phenomenal.
Thank you.
We're gonna add some written pieces and some links that will accompany the podcast so that people can actually physically connect to your website and to your gala information, as well as connect to you if they want, to support No More Tears. And I really, really hope, I'm looking at the microphone like people can see me, and I really, really hope that people people will do that because, again, you know, if you missed our conversation somehow and our passion behind it, the realities are that, you know what, these nonprofits we're doing our best to make change in our community and to help those that need it, and we need your support to
and
do
especially
that.
the grassroots model nonprofits like yours and mine.
Yes.
And I'm so grateful to you for highlighting No More Tears and for giving me the opportunity to share my story, because once again, coming back to helping one another as women, and you're the prime example of it with this medium, you know, with this format that we're going to get our story out there. So thank you so much.
No, well, thank you for sharing your space and your time and all about you and what you do. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.